Great. Thanks, everyone. I'll be pulling up my slides here and we'll start the show. So, it is an honor to join you all virtually, and I hope to keep the conversation going beyond today. So, if you're in front of your computer and want to scan this QR code, it'll directly link you, literally, to LinkedIn, and would be happy to hear your comments, your thoughts, your suggestions, and continue to maintain some dialogues in the virtual space. I find this is a little bit easier to connect with people. And as an extrovert that does a lot of virtual presentations, it's wonderful to connect with you a little bit offline. So feel free to search me out that way as well. All right. Well, today I have the privilege of speaking to a really committed audience of professionals that are focused in creating optimal environments for human health and well-being, which is how I would describe many facility managers that are positioned to have a greater impact on the future of the health of the population than doctors. As a research scientist myself, I've also never had anyone in my field or in the medical field ever contest that statement. And that is because the majority of the determinants, so the, if you will, that lead to issues of access to healthcare, your genetics, behavior, environment, the majority of determinants of your health are going to be controlled by your environment and behavior. Therefore, the people that control our environments, that control behaviors and influence behaviors, have a huge impact to make on how long and well we live. So, honored to join you all today in this space. And I'll kick off by asking this question. It's been on my mind lately, which is how much is an additional 10 years of life worth? I know that some of you already have calculators out. I mean, is it $1 a day? Is it $10 a day? Is it unlimited? Is money about buying time? These are big questions to ask because we live longer now in the United States than we ever have before. Those numbers teetered a little bit in the pandemic, but largely we lived to around 82, which means you live 20 years longer than your grandparents did in 1962. What will you do with those 10 years? What kind of quality will those 10 years be? And many of us will have an early and late retirement. So historically, the formula went you're born, you grow up, you go to school, potentially you meet a partner, and you work the majority of your life. And when you retire, you then die. And I know that sounds a little straightforward, but that literally is the way that even Social Security was set up, because on average, we live to 62. But now we have early and late retirement. Now we don't die from infectious diseases the way we did historically. We are dying from chronic diseases. So you can't wait till later to think about your health, and the places you spend time in matter. Recently at a Brain Health Summit, this quote was offered, and it's really made me think, no pun intended, is that on average, our lifespan is longer than your brain span. So that makes sense for many of us, this idea that when we do have those additional 10 years of life, is will our abilities, our focus be as good in those last 10 years? And how do we actually think about environment support, not just your physical health, but your brain health? So with all that said, when we really think about how many years we'll have, how long we'll live, and how well we will live, then what does it mean to invest in health today? And this is a really important part of understanding why the well building standard is going to be the path forward. So hang with me here, because I think when we start talking about why we should do things for our health, the formula is not as simple as dollars and cents, nor is it a simple ROI. It really looks at this idea of who invested in their health now or 5 years from now, and how long did it take to benefit in that investment. So it's important to define terms. So what do we mean by health? So if we say investing in health, what does that mean for the well building standard? So when I say to you, do you feel healthy today? Do you think, oh, my asthma's fine? Or yeah, I got enough rest and my cold's gone away. Or do you think about being happy? How does the word flourishing land? There's a lot of new research out of Harvard and with Gallup just published on flourishing organizations. What about the word thriving? Or do you just want to have the energy you need to do what you want through the day? Is it brain capital? Is it risk reduction? Is it your energy, productivity, or happiness? So think a little bit about that because that's going to matter when it comes to measurement. All right, so what do we mean by investment? Is investment mean dollars down today, therefore equals dollars you will get back later? Well, not quite, because this is your health. So it's going to matter how we measure. And for many of the companies that we work with, it's not, do I spend more to get well certified? Rather, it's, did I even know what I spent to begin with? And it's looking at a lot of invisible costs that so many people on the line are familiar with, which comes to the operations and maintenance when we do poorly design or don't have roadways or pathways forward to be able to create healthy environments for all. I would posit the majority of the people in the audience today will have been on the job through the pandemic and through the wildfire smokes. And I'm hopeful that does not reoccur this summer, but there is a chance and there will continue to be events like this. If anyone told you the pandemic that we didn't know that was coming, that's just not true in public health. We knew it was coming. We regularly deal with epidemics, and then we look to contain them so they don't reach pandemic proportions. We didn't know the name, but we knew how bad it could be. So the idea that you're preparing and investing for such events, not if, but when, has redefined the term of resilience. And like many people during times of tumultuous climate events and other significant adverse events, those that invested in infrastructure, those that invest in emergency plans, those that invested ahead of time tend to quite literally weather the storm. So investment here means a lot of things when we look at health. So my buddy Warren Buffett here says that someone's sitting in the shade today because someone planted a tree a long time ago. I think it's a beautiful way of saying, as one of the best investors of all time, that there are many people out there that invested long ago that benefit people today. And I will just acknowledge so many people on the line today, and I saw many organizations that Well already works with represented online today, that many of you are my tree planters, literally. You were first in the sustainability movement, you raised your hand, you went above and beyond, and you created sustainable, healthy buildings. And I thank you for that because it is providing shade for so many people today and will continue to do that. And we want to sort of celebrate that as well as moving into our 10-year anniversary in 2024 that we just celebrated. We are looking critically who invested in health, who invested in well, how has it paid back, and what do we need to be thinking about for the next 10 years when it comes to healthy, sustainable, productive, efficient, and incredible spaces and places that we spend time. So when we look at our history, we have learned a lot, and we've been able to study those that made the early investments and learn from them to scale. So on the screen, you see that when we first started over 10 years ago, we were looking at, for example, 50,000 square feet of project space. It's pretty incredible that now we're upwards of 6 billion square feet of project space globally, representing close to 150 countries. I am thrilled as the person that developed the program of the WELL AP and WELL faculty to also recognize that those beyond projects are the people that raise their hand, committed to learning and understanding that they do hold the power to change the future of the public's health by creating the spaces that people spend time in. It's been an incredible movement. Clearly, we couldn't do it without the partners and organizations that raised their hand to join this journey with us. So before I dig into more of the information specifically around the WELL Building Standard, I do just like to take a pause and think a little bit about this bigger picture. So when we look at the next 10 years, what do we anticipate? What will work look like? I was frequently asked this question during the pandemic, and there was 1,000 different answers. I like that quote that when you look into a crystal ball of the future and try to predict it, be prepared to get glass shards everywhere. So we didn't know what the future of work was. That was the only thing that we did know. And it's shifting rapidly. But I take a lot of solace in not predicting the future as much as looking at the past to better prepare and understand what we need to be thinking about in what I would term as this new or next era of work. So, to look at the past and understand this, we look at different generations or epochs or eras of work. And the first one is the optimism years from 1945 to 1977. So, this would be an era of work that was defined as having booming commercial property investments, iconic skyscrapers. It was such that those skyscrapers really symbolized the era's optimism. If anyone in the audience knows about the hit TV show Mad Men, with the martini lunches and the culture there, it does depict this sort of concept in the show of the office culture of the time, the 9 to 5 work days, very male dominated workplaces, conventional business norms, but also a sense that if you worked at the same organization, then you got the gold watch, right? For more than 10, 20, 30 years. You retired. You could trust the organization was taking care of you. That shifts. Actually, Reagan was one of the first to see massive layoffs inside union approaches, but that was also a gateway for many other employers to step up and in, Jack Welch being one of those, right? With the GE culture of letting go of the bottom 10% that weren't performing. And it was this idea that maybe you can't trust your organization and they won't necessarily take care of you. And we see a lot more movement in the industry of people having, starting to step into having more than one career. People are starting to live longer during this time, and women are more prominently in the workplace. And so these questions of work-life balance start to come in to the narrative, which I would argue is not a real term, is this idea of it's always going to be a process and journey. And it's not like we just turn one off and turn the other on in quite the way that term represents. During the 1980s, we saw the Enron trial that further cemented ideas around corporate distrust. We also see technology starting to come into the workplace. And at this time, we see the first graduates really emerging into the workforce with still preserving their experience as their first job at going to work. I don't know if anyone in the audience still says they go to work, but yet just go downstairs and get on a computer. And that might be the relic that you might have started your career during this time, versus saying I'm working, which can be done anywhere, which is represented in 2007 to 2019, which is termed the co-working years. And this is when we do see the real scaling of the sort of WeWork concept. Even though Regency had long developed it, WeWork said you can work anywhere in any city and you can rent an office space because it's cheap, leasing rates are low, terms are favorable, and by the way, you can have beer at lunch. This was the era of the Googles and Bloombergs creating these citadels of status, redefining office spaces that had foosball and M&M containers in it. I should say large M&M containers, in which we actually saw upticks around weight gained in certain offices as a result of that. But still, it was deemed the cool, amazing workplace of the future. However, many people were recognized that those workplaces were such that you never left. There starts to be a mounting pressure during this time around mindfulness, around this idea of burnout, which is directly linked to work. Therefore, your employer is held accountable for it. And now we start to feel guilty about our wellness habits. The idea of going to the gym makes us feel bad, even though our ancestors never did. This is sort of the time that green juice and yoga epitomizes the idea of someone in wellness. Yet, for so many, we were burned out, exhausted. And the WHO in 2019 deemed that work was leading to over $3 billion of burnout. And many news outlets took this on to say that work was killing us. And before you shake your head at that, pretty interesting when we look at the fact that over the last 150 years of occupational health, is that we were able to reduce so many hazards in the workplace, biological, chemical, physical hazards, just to be replaced by psychosocial hazards. And if you don't believe me, and if any of you have colleagues or friends that are in the construction industry, we published an article around 2018 highlighting that the leading cause of death in the construction industry is suicide. So, what is it about work that was killing us? What about these psychosocial hazards? At the same time, here comes the pandemic, which makes us question, what does time mean? Time is not all equal units and value. So, time with my family, time with my friends, time with my loved ones, time to have wellness in my life by taking a walk outside. Many people also felt isolated and really yearned for an idea of feeling like they were part of something again. And because our shutdown was so long in the United States, unlike our Asian counterparts, we also see a complete reset of the era's expectations of what work will be. And I think this is very interesting because, unlike in the mezzanine years, the 1980s, where we had data about women in the workplace, we had data about what was needed to create better balance in our life, we didn't really listen. Now we have the data about what people want, why they do or don't want to return. And although there was a lot of pushback and still is in return to office, there's also a lot of recognition that people are feeling lonely, overwhelmed working from home, particularly women in this place, high knowledge work. If you're interested, the Global Study on Workplace Attitudes and Arrangements provides monthly, if not more, updates on the global trends around return to work and increased expectations of what a worker wants. If I return, I want a space that supports my health, that I can step outside, that has good food to eat, that allows me to feel energized. I don't want a place that I'm coughing and in a beige cubicle with beige carpet, with a beige desk where I can't even see the sunlight. I don't want to feel trapped in a building. I want to live longer. I want to live better. I want to think about how my brain actually is living longer and better too. So, welcome to the new and next era of work. We are in it, we are defining it. So, in this new era of work, we have to understand how to better measure our investment in health. So, is it as simple as dollars and cents? No. We are seeing the leading companies measure aspects of engagement, flourishing, brain capital. We're looking at longevity, brain span, top indicators, balance of work life, childcare, aging, need for mentorship, accountability. We're also looking at the aspects of technology, isolation, the need to connect, and longevity being based on relationships, which is all the way that you recruit and retrain and drive the best talent who you paid 100% to be in the building, and you're only getting 60% out of them because they're tired, they're fatigued, they can't focus. We already covered the beige wall and the beige carpet and the beige elevator and the beige food. And before you know it, 90,000 hours of your life at work and 90% of your time spent indoors is going to equal you not having those extra 10 years of life. And humans are the greatest asset that any company or country can have, according to my friend Winston here. So if health is an investment and not an expense, and I hope I've convinced you of that, then where do we start? Where is your role? Are you sitting back in your seat? Are you leaning forward? Are you doing this or are you already behind? And the Well Building Standard, after being developed after 10 years, the research is available and downloadable for free. So if you're just hearing about it, the answer is you're behind. But you also are not alone in recognizing the majority of programs around facility managers do not offer or engage around health. It's often an elective, it's something that you must learn on the job. And there's the majority of architecture, design programs, even sustainability programs don't require that you learn about health. And interestingly enough, for a lot of my colleagues in the space of public health and medicine, they are not required to take any classes on design or operations of a building. Yet they spend a lot of their time in those settings as well, but can't make the difference they need. So we are in this together in this new era of work. We are trying to examine how do we work together in this. Whether or not your company can do this today, you as an individual can. So I welcome you to be part of the journey, to raise your hand, to step in, to lean in for yourself, for your own space of living a long life and a well life, but also for those that you love. And to see that where you spend time and how you spend time matters. So the well journey starts right there. And we lead you to understand these different steps that can be taken through ratings, certifications, and longer term commitments. So let's talk a little bit about what the WELL building standard is. It is the largest and most comprehensive building certification system in the world. It also is the largest, most comprehensive certification system in the world for workplace health, period. There are no other systems that I am aware of that you can certify across 10 different concepts of health that are as global and comprehensive in nature. So although some systems will look at air quality, for example, ASHRAE, we're also going to see green building rating systems. We're going to see workplace performance, great places to work, but they're not global in the way that we are, and they're not as comprehensive. So a healthy building, what is it? Is it just good air? Or what about the thermal comfort complaints? Is light the most important because people aren't sleeping at night? Or is the food that you eat? What about just feeling connected to your neighbors and wanting to show up? Or is it the fact that you can move throughout the day and not be stuck in that beige office? So we will argue it is all of them, and it is multidimensional. In WELL, we look at mind, community, movement, water, air, light, thermal comfort, nourishment, sound, and materials. We've reviewed over 7,000 peer-reviewed studies and citations. We've engaged over 20,000 industry leaders and practitioners. We have over 74,000 enrolled commercial and residential locations, and even more now, and over 500 evidence-based interventions. So it is free to download, and I encourage that everyone can download it today. It would take you probably an hour or less to even look through the list to understand what are you currently doing on your site, what could you be doing, and frankly, we all learn a little bit more about our own health and well-being in the process. One of my first sessions ever, this is about 10 years ago, and I had a woman tell me that after she went through a training, it was an all-day training back then, is that she'd lost 15 pounds in the last month. I do not even begin to say that I will take credit for that, but I will say that there are many crusaders out there that have raised their hand because health is very personal, and this has changed the way that they think about their health. And I think that's extremely powerful story to share. So those are the 10 concepts. When you pursue the WELL building standard, you will choose which path meets your needs. Are you one building? Are you part of 10? Do you need to start today on a lighting strategy across multiple buildings for LEDs? What are you doing for wildfire smoke prevention? What are we doing for occupancy rate fluctuations? How are we looking at manual overrides? How are we attracting and recruiting talent back in the office? So those might be individual or targeted KPIs or goals that you have, or you may be looking at trying to certify asset by asset. So you might only have one asset, or you might start with one comprehensive certification and move to others. The only thing you need to know is that you raise your hand and we'll find a path for you. Ratings is the easiest. It's going to be about 25 of the features of WELL, and that gets you started. And that's what we're going to talk about today. You need to know that WELL applies to every building with a front door, and this is expanded into WELL for residential. So that's also a huge resource for everyone here, is how to also think about the homes that we live in. For facility managers, it's so critical that you are our partners in this process, not just during the design and build of spaces pursuing WELL, but for those renovating, operating, and maintaining. We just had a really powerful webcast, and I featured several of our speakers from Central Eastern Europe. And in Hungary, they looked at 80% of the building stock already existing and what they need to do to achieve WELL on historic buildings. And it was truly inspiring and also very possible. And many of these buildings honestly knew more in certain ways about health 100 years ago, such as around ventilation strategies, that have made them resilient through the pandemic. And there's lessons to be learned there. So all buildings are All buildings apply for well, whether that's new, whether you're renovating the space or just operating, maintaining it today. But if you're not in the conversation, then you're clearly behind. So as a facility manager, if you dive into the well building standard, you will actually see us navigate specifically as to where you would be the responsible party to submit information on. And I think that's really powerful. It shows you all the other people here that would be on your team, your owner, food provider, HR, architect, engineer, contractor. But we also see for facilities that they will step into a rating or into the Well at Scale program. And they do so just to bring everyone together, to force the conversation and to demonstrate a multi-year roadmap. So diving a little bit deeper is the Well Health Safety Rating. As I said, a rating is a portion of the certification, but it's a really powerful place to start. The price tag is much lower. You don't have the same requirements, but it gets the team familiar with the process, gets everyone on board, allows us to track and validate that progress, and is particularly important, even in a post-pandemic new era of work, to demonstrate that you have addressed these issues because people want to know, and they will want to know for the next crisis. And some of the most powerful stories for Well around frontline workers, construction workers that never were sent home or allowed to work from home, yet they maintained in their offices. And BCCI is a really powerful case study reporting that they had no one that had COVID on the job that was identified, and they had already pursued well. What was important about that was because of their ventilation and filtration, source control strategies, cleaning practices, management of mold, reduction of toxins in the environment, but also their strategies around maintenance of the space. And this is an interesting part that I know many of you recognize, but how do you report that information to your building occupants? Data is not information without a translator. Data can be overwhelming to a building user. And I would posit that as much as we would love to have every building user care about their air quality PM 2.5 metric on a daily basis, the reality is we basically are going to be the gatekeepers for them. We do this for them so they don't have to worry about the PM 2.5. But when they do, and when the wildfire smoke come, then we're able to say to them clearly, this is the metric. We have been able to track this over time, and we're able to report it clearly to you. And if you do need to take emergency steps, which we've seen the last 10 years on the building occupancy space, then we have an emergency plan because we already thought through it and we communicated to everyone and everyone is prepared. And so we saw those well buildings really have a stronger resiliency through the pandemic. And I have some powerful case studies that even document that from a multifamily residential perspective is that we actually had a project that was able to show that people felt better moving into a well building, their stress, their mood was enhanced during a pandemic, So they were prepared. You might be interested to know that during the same time of the pandemic, when we saw advocates and experts testify in front of Congress, they weren't submitting a lot of new research on building strategies as much as they were reiterating what we knew but hadn't taken action. And for wells and above code standard, that's really important. We know this, it's just not implemented across the board with code. I am excited since then. We've seen more novel interventions and research emerging, particularly for the detection, the quick detection of certain pathogens. And I would encourage those. We're doing some work right now at Duke through Premier and others. If you are interested in the microbiome, or if you're interested in some of the ARC projects coming out, specifically looking at pathogen detection, bacterial detection systems, there is a lot coming down the line. And the answer is not to just figure out bad bugs and get rid of them. The environment is way more complex than that. And so we will continue to see those innovations. But my point rest is that if you were a well building going into the pandemic or into some of the issues around the wildfire smoke, you were prepared. You had a plan, you could demonstrate the plan, you communicate the plan, and you were part of a leading conversation around health. So who has done this? We are over 25,000 locations that are enrolled in the health safety rating. We're over 3 billion square feet. And we are able to then, for many of those projects, they'll step into a full certification or they'll step into the Well at Scale program, which means they'll look at more of a subscription model over time. Okay, great. So that is the rating. I wanted to spend just a minute on the certification systems in particular. So for the Well full certification, a unique aspect of that is our requirement for performance testing, which is one of the favorite parts of Well for my facility managers who can really document and validate that you have a healthy building. You didn't just say that you had a healthy building, you can actually prove it. And this becomes very important when we have complaints from building users or there's an issue. We're able to quickly address that because we know that the third party has validated that you've done everything that you can and you're continuing to monitor that space. So with that in mind, I always like to spend some time just digging a little deeper into some of the different concepts of Well, because I think that makes it more personable and relatable. So let's choose air. And so this gives you a snapshot of the different features in Well on air. So we will look at overall air quality. We want to see VOCs, total VOCs. We're looking at formaldehyde issues. We want to understand particulate matter 10 and 2.5, the nasty stuff that gets deep, deep into our lungs and into our bloodstream. We will test for that on site. Many companies are choosing to use continuous monitoring, and that enables them to have sensors that can tell them where their current status is. And there's powerful new applications, even where we're looking to move from some of even the early battery issues and calibration issues to more advanced systems and more predictive systems. We will look at, of course, a smoke-free environment. Wow, the world has changed since I started this work, and there's a lot of different versions of smoking and combusting that can happen in the workplace. And so we do require that no smoking is allowed on campus and throughout the building or property. We look at ventilation effectiveness, construction pollution management, particularly for those new builds and renos, and operable windows. This is such an interesting concept, particularly in other countries that have a lot more control and operation of our windows for fresh air capacity, and where that's so limited in the States. I have countless stories of this in schools during the pandemic, and right down to the union demand for teachers and our ability to open or close windows. I'm sure many of you can relate to this. Beyond that, we're going to look at combustion minimization. We'll look at air filtration strategies and microbe and mold control, as well as cleaning practices. That cleaning practice one really came up when I saw a lot of those EPA list in strategies during the pandemic. The spraying of the Lysol that, of course, is quickly wiped up and doesn't actually kill a viral load until it maintains on surface. So we need those strategies in place beforehand. Too many of the materials and surfaces cannot consistently be cleaned with those list end products. And so being a lot more thoughtful of our strategies, and also really thinking about the secondary impacts around respiratory ailments for those that are exposed to poor cleaning products in the space. So when we first launched, can you imagine in Shanghai, where on a nice day, you can barely see out in front of you from the tallest tower, to a place where the buildings you walk in, you watch people take deep breaths for the first time, where the particulate load, so your AQI index or air quality index, is going to report 500 to 700 on a daily basis. In New Delhi, that happens about 3/4 of the year. And for some of you that were located in New York down to DC, or in California or Canada, you realize what happened during the wildfires, where those levels reached 300, 400, 500, and you couldn't breathe. You couldn't think. It was hazy, metallic smelling. That is a regular occurrence in Shanghai. So for this property to pursue Well at Hayworth, as one of our first projects in the world, they actually created an app in which they would tell people that they can come use the space to get a break from the poor pollution. And it was an incredible example of how they used data to leverage a customer base to use the space. So I love that. This is a project from Lendlease, the Barangaroo Towers in Sydney, Australia. This is an amazing plant wall. And what's so powerful about this is that we recognize the need to be exposed to nature. That concept is termed biophilia. Yet we are not getting enough exposure. And where we bring filter maintenance in, and we look at ventilation strategies, is that nature in many ways does it better, and also provides not only the visual aspect of an air quality strategy, but interestingly, it also even helps with acoustics and, of course, humidity. So, a pretty powerful example of a building that was able to achieve air quality requirements for well, while also achieving beauty, biophilia, and creating an environment that you can hear in, that you feel better in, and is potentially better positioned during seasonal changes because of some of those humidity levels. So if you're interested and you want to throw in the chat, if you'd like to learn more about our different concept areas, I am happy to go into the research and science, whether you want to learn about what we do in materials or sound specifically, what we're doing in circadian lighting strategies, or even nourishment and movement access or mind. I'm happy to go into any of those more in depth. So, because I'm a research scientist, I do love data. It is a love language of mine, where I think that we're able to take some of the initial arguments I made around longevity, the lifespan, the investment in health, and really put some numbers and stories behind that. And what we've learned too is when we also can drive greater transparency of reporting and, frankly, competition, we're able to make the change we want. And I'm on the right side of history because I fight for healthy buildings for everyone everywhere. And I know many of you are on the line doing the same. And often it's the numbers that are told, but it's also the stories, because each of those people have a face, they have a story. And the majority of us in this virtual room have dealt with a chronic disease condition. Over half, upwards of 70, 80%, are dealing with two comorbidities currently, if not more. Most of us have been touched by cancer from a relative, a loved one, or yourself. Health is one thing you can't live without. It is part of our life. And so the stories that compel people to work with us are even more powerful than the numbers. But we recognize that those numbers are important to drive business, to drive market, to communicate to different teams around how and where to start with well. So bring it, right? Let's get all these numbers together. Let's make a compelling argument and continue to be on the right side of history to create better places for everyone everywhere. So this is an example of a client well summary report. This is not meant to be an eye exam for those on the screen. It's just meant to showcase all the different ways that we're able to look comparatively at how your building or company is performing across your portfolio and across your competitors, whether that's in your reporting, in the concept areas that you're achieving, in the time that it takes. These reports are powerful to harness all the team members. So too often HR is getting all the credit for the people investment. Facilities may not be as closely linked to some of the tech or talent management strategies, but yet you are all very much aligned when it comes to people measures. So we want to make sure to celebrate that across the teams, and this report helps us do it. So this is our well at scale leaderboard. I love a good competition, particularly when it's making the right kind of change in the world. So these are examples of where we see leadership, where we recognize our leaders around the world and where they've stepped up and in. Most of my leaders, I had a chance to travel to many locations around the world as we've launched well. And I will tell you that many of my leaders, many of my change makers or my innovators that were the first to pursue this, are some of the most inspiring people. That's why it makes my job awesome. I get to recharge with them. But being an innovator or change maker is also lonely. Often they are one person in a team of many people, and they're the only one designated to focus on sustainability or designated to focus on workplace strategy and health. And if you're one of those people, I want to recognize it and say that this is hard work. But you are absolutely not alone in this. And part of our commitment to bring well around the world is to spend some time in all the different places that we work and connect our community leaders together so that you can recharge. And we'll do that through these awards. We'll do that through recognition. It's critically important, as you all know, that health is global, but our buildings are local. So we need to start with the strategies and connect with others, making the difference and frankly, recharge a bit. Okay, so far where we've come is that we've talked about the compelling argument of why we should live longer and better. We have then said, let's put some money on it and let's question, what does that money get us for an investment? And do we even know what we're measuring? We looked at this idea of taking a step up and in to WELL as a strategy for facility managers to lead the future of the public's health by creating the buildings we spend 90% of our time in to be healthier for all. And now comes the point where we look at the proof case. So let's spend some time directly in the data. In science, when data consistently supports a hypothesis 100% of the time, it is considered proof. And we have moved to the proof case of WELL. So let me share with you the evidence from a couple of different research studies. Again, throw any questions in the chat here. I can always talk offline if you'd like to know more. These slides are pretty jam-packed with information, so I'll just do a sort of a high level for you. But what you need to know is really the box there that says evidence. So for this first study that I'd like to feature, we're looking at how WELL certification boosts workplace satisfaction, productivity, and well-being. Those words are tossed around a lot, but this is the largest and most comprehensive longitudinal study to date that looked at 6 offices pre-post under WELL V1 on a longitudinal basis using psychometrically validated scales to measure health. In other words, this is a serious damn report, and it was published in a peer-reviewed journal. It took many years to do this work, but what I'm particularly proud of is if you download the report in Building an Environment, you can look exactly at what features the projects pursued. You can look at what the subjective measures were from their occupants, and you can look at the performance testing scores. So you can look at the air feature that they achieved. You can look at whether or not satisfaction improved from stuffiness, air quality, thermal comfort. And then you can also look at, did they meet those levels in their performance testing around the VOC reduction, around maintaining humidity levels, for example. So I encourage you to download that if you'd like to learn more. What was pretty powerful about this report was, yes, we saw 28% overall improvement in workplace satisfaction across those 6 sites. That was statistically significant. So that's beyond a random occurrence. We didn't just summarize or look at a bar chart. This was really deeply doing statistical analysis. We saw a 10-point improvement in productivity scores using global benchmarks for that. So we don't just ask people, hey, do you feel productive in this new shiny building? We really spend time trying to understand what is productivity and how has that improved or declined. In this case, we're proud to say we saw improvement. One of my favorite impact scores is the 26% improvement in reported well-being scores. I think that really hits me because the scale that we used was from the World Health Organization, and it's used in many medical trials. So you would look at a certain drug, you would look at a certain intervention, a diet plan, for example, and you'd use the same scale, and then you'd measure, did it make an impact? And just ask yourself, when's the last time you walked into a building and after a year, you could report an improvement in your well-being over taking a pill or doing a diet regime? Because it's a building that cares about you. And it feels like that when you're there and you're able to move and connect in ways that encourage that well-being. The second study I'd like to showcase is that WELL-certified spaces outperform non-certified spaces. So for anyone that is interested in whether or not a high-performing building versus a high-performing plus WELL building is better, this is your study. In other words, I'm often asked, well, if it's a brand new building, aren't people just satisfied because it's new? How can you prove that WELL is what's making them healthier in that building? And this would be the results that come out of Australia from Dr. Candido's work here, demonstrating that 20 of the 23 aspects related to physical environment were significantly higher in WELL offices. And so this is, so we're talking about noise. That's a real big one that comes up in most green and WELL buildings, thermal comfort, active design. These are aspects, light came up, where we're showing that because the building pursued new design plus well, and it's a high performing building that well made the difference. We have published a investing in health pays back report, which is a culmination of 60 plus studies. And that'll help you break down the ROI in terms of higher rental rates. You can look at recruitment and retention and performance. Those are your people metrics. We can also look at overall NPV for the building for those investors and how well buildings outperforms the market. This slide demonstrates the outcomes of a study led by the Center for Built Environment on how well certified buildings drive higher satisfaction compared to LEED buildings. So 39% of well buildings had occupants that reported they were more satisfied than those in LEED certified buildings. So I want to be thoughtful here. LEED does focus on environmental sustainability, but in the end, we focus on human sustainability, and that is what our goal is and our expertise is. And we recognize that there's not one system that can do everything. And further, we recognize when it comes to human health, there is a distinct understanding by each occupant of their health that is very different than an occupant's understanding of sustainability. And many of us have struggled to try to make that conversation where individuals can understand more sustainability. But the fact remains that when it comes to making a significant change in the building from a human health perspective, well is going to be your leader in that. And we are happy to partner with LEED and other green building rating systems around the world to achieve high results. All right, we're coming to the end, and I believe we're going to tee up questions. So I just want to close out on, hopefully I've gotten your attention today. Hopefully there's been a moment of pause. I hope to recognize and honor so many leaders that are in the room today and welcome others. If this is new or if you're just joining, I encourage you to take that first step, to download, to reach out. There's an incredible network of well-accredited professionals. That's one way to raise your hand, regardless of whether or not your organization will pursue well. You as an individual will be a leader in health. And as I said, it's a powerful personal learning experience for many of those leaders. And we, as shared, we have thousands of well APs around the world. If you want to come hang out with me a little bit more, I would love to meet you in person. It was nice to see some of you in Baltimore this past spring. We are also going to be in different event spaces around the world as part of our global event series. So as I mentioned, I was just in Central Eastern Europe. We'll be going on to India. We'll be in Amsterdam. We just had our first summit in Charlotte, which was pretty incredible. We'll have a DC summit coming up here. And that DC Summit will be without charge, is the current strategy there to make sure that all of our DCers feel really invited to the full day of experiences. So hope to see you there. And we also, for my LA folks or Western folks, Western coastal folks, we'd love to have you join us there in September. Thank you again for your commitment to this, for your time and energy. I welcome you into being part of something that's bigger than all of us and our commitment to make a change for the future, to really defend, to protect, to create resilient places for everyone, everywhere as leaders in that. And I invite you all to be part of this as the We Are Well movement. Thanks so much. And with that, I'll close out my presentation and turn it over to the team to see if any questions have come in.
All right, so the first question is, what is Well doing to help set standards for cleaning processes, frequency, and products used?
So, yep, great question. So in the AIR concept, we have a specific feature on cleaning practices. This is going to look at different formulas that we use, so literally the chemical compounds. It's also going to look at even issues around filter media. So when we stir up, for example, air, and we look at issues such as buffing in hospitals, right, that actually can create so many VOCs. And although people perceive that as a bright, shiny floor, that is not good for human health. In that feature, for you to achieve it, you are then recognized as part of your WELL certification path. If you want to start with a cleaning practice today, but aren't certifying across all concepts, please still document it. So that's part of the WELL at Scale program. That's for companies that can actually sign up and into this program and never certify. They may just want it as a roadmap to say, we're improving cleaning practices across sites. There's so much I can say on this, and I've published papers even to the point of looking at environmental maintenance and service teams, the turnover, the unionization, the practicality, the strategies, the training, the maintenance, the awareness, the education. It's more than a bottle of soap. So you'll see in the future there is multiple parts, and that's true across well. You'll see, for example, in some of our air quality features, we want you to achieve these levels, but we'll also have a plan in place if you don't, or if 1 year later you're not able to achieve it. What is your plan? Have you thought through the behavior, the leadership strategies behind this? And not just simply saying, let's look at a cleaning product list. So I encourage you, I can't link it right now, but I do believe a link to the Well Building Standards in these slides or follow-up notes, and then you can directly go to the air quality section, check that out. And if you'd like to be more involved, you can also join our advisories. So the work here is not done. Keep pushing us, keep showing us what you're learning, what you're seeing, what you're experiencing, and that goes to make our work better. All right, next question.
In your opinion, when will the United States have a national standard that requires all building products, furnishings, and mechanical systems to be constructed of non-toxic, non-allergenic materials?
Oh, what a great question. I mean, there's an irony in that so much of my life's work is in an above code standard. And at this point in time, regardless of the politics, we still do not have a comprehensive indoor air quality standard in place in this country. Yet we have outdoor air, we have water, we do not have federal legislation on this. So when we look specifically at building products, furnishings, that's interesting because there is an air quality component there too of the off-gassing clearly. There's a sustainability component of that, so it's sort of good business practice. And I really see a lot of voluntary market forces. And I love working with Mark, wonderful. So it sounds like you're joining from industry here. It's a big deal for us to work with our partners. We partner, for example, with a Shaw or a Milliken, and we're going to say, we know that we could do this better for human health. All of the science is saying that we need to reduce TVOCs. We're going to work with BIFMA. We're going to reassign how we measure for emissions from certain furnitures or flooring or coverings, for example. And they step up and into leading it. They drive that demand. Those projects that pursue WELL are recognized. We have many companies that join our Works with WELL program, and that says our product meets your standard. If you're going for WELL, our product's going to help you get there. So at this point, 10 years in, I see voluntary market forces. I go down the list of what countries I think are stepping up and into leading more of a regulatory standard-based procedures on this. And I hope in my lifetime to see that and in some ways be out of a job. But I think that we have a lot of challenges in front of us that aren't insurmountable by any means, but there's also a lot of power and innovation and market forces. So more to come, Mark, and we'd love to work with you on that.
All right, it looks like that will be our last question for today. Thanks again, Whitney, for all the great information. Do you have any final thoughts for our audience before we conclude today's event?
Sure. Well, thank you again. Do reach out to me on LinkedIn. Let me know you're out there in the ether. Let me know if you'll be joining an upcoming event. That's always great to make that connection. I'm a huge proponent that facility managers that receive training in WELL should be not just recognized, but should be compensated. I think that if you have more power in the future of the public's health than physicians, that you should be recognized for that in your titling, in your credentialing, and like I said, in how you are compensated. I think to drive a future of individuals in and pursuing facility management, we also need to clearly drive the definition of the job and drive the job market. I'm proud at WELL that we create secondary and tertiary markets. The leaders that have the great materials, Mark, that have the great insulation and strategies that are out there, we recognize them, we drive business. We drive business to our leading facility managers. We get them on stage, we stand them up, we elevate them to showcase like this is what matters, and there should be increased compensation alongside of that. We empower, educate that voice. So as someone who just deeply appreciates coming from public health and having my PhD in public health, is that does not mean that I'm at all qualified to design or operate a building. So I can talk to you all day about research, but until we create the jobs, the projects, the buildings, and the pathways for leaders to step up and into that, then I have not successfully created healthy buildings. So appreciate the partnership and hope to continue to push and define facility managers as leaders in public health.
Great. Thanks again, Whitney. Just a reminder, everyone, to receive your CEU certificate, you can download it from the Earn Certification module. Today's webcast will be archived on facilitiesnet.com, and don't forget to register for NFMT Remix coming to Orlando this October. And with that, I will conclude today's event. Thanks everyone for attending. Have a great rest of your day.
Thanks, everyone.